My name is Zara. I am 28 years old. And I want to tell you something that I have never been fully able to say out loud until now. I was 7 years old the first time I understood that my life was not my own. Not because someone sat me down and told me, but because of the way the adults around me talked about my future like I was not in the room. Like I was a thing being decided on. A package being prepared for delivery. I grew up in a small, tight community in the northern part of a Muslim region where the rules were not written on paper. They were in the air. They were in the silence. They were in the way women walked and spoke and lowered their eyes when a man passed. My mother had 6 children. I was the second. My father was a man who prayed 5 times a day without missing once and who also raised his hand at home without thinking twice. He was respected outside our walls. Inside them, we were afraid of him. Not because he was always violent, but because you never knew which version of him was going to walk through the door. So we stayed small. We stayed quiet. We learned early that the safest thing a girl could do was disappear into the background and wait. I was 9 years old when they told me I was going to be married. My mother was washing fabric outside when my father came and stood near the doorway. He did not look at me directly. He spoke to the air in front of him and said my name and then said the name of a man I had met once at a gathering. A man named Asman. He was 38. He had a beard that reached his chest and a voice that sounded like gravel moving in a bucket. He had been married once before. His first wife had died. Now he wanted a second one and my father had agreed. I did not cry. I did not even fully understand what it meant. I just looked at my mother and waited for her to say something. She did not look up from the fabric. She kept scrubbing. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. The women came to our house the week before the wedding. They braided my hair and painted my hands and dressed me in fabric that was too heavy and too bright for a 9-year-old girl. They sang and clapped and called it a blessing. They told me I was lucky. They told me Asman was a good man. A godly man. A man who knew the Quran from beginning to end. I sat there with painted hands and a stomach full of something I did not have the word for yet. Later I learned the word was dread. The wedding night I will not describe in full. I will only say this. I was 9 years old and I was terrified. I did not understand what was happening. I only understood that I had no choice and that no one was coming to stop it. When it was over I lay still and stared at the ceiling and I felt something leave me. Not physically. Something deeper. Something that had been mine. Something quiet and soft that had lived in my chest since I was small. It left that night and I spent the next 20 years looking for it. I became a wife in that house. Not a child. Not a student. A wife. I cooked before sunrise. I cleaned until my hands cracked. I washed his clothes and ironed his shirts and served his tea without being asked. He did not speak to me kindly. He was not cruel every day. But he was absent in the way that matters most. He did not see me as a person. He saw me as a function. Something that existed to serve and to carry children and to stay quiet. By the time I was 11 I had already stopped dreaming about anything outside those walls. When I was 12 I noticed a girl in our village who had a notebook and a pencil and she was writing something in it. I watched her for a long time. She looked free in a way I could not explain. I went home and I asked Asman if I could have a notebook. He looked at me for a long time and then he said women who fill their heads with words fill their hearts with trouble. That was the end of that. When I was 13 my body changed and my fear grew because I knew what was coming next. I was right. By 14 I was pregnant. My body was not ready. My hips were narrow and the midwives whispered between themselves when they thought I was not listening. My brothers came the next morning. 3 of them. They did not knock. They walked in shouting before the door was fully open. The words they used I will not repeat here. But the meaning was clear. I had shamed the family. I had left the faith. I was no longer their sister. Usman stood in the corner watching and did not say a single word in my defense. I heard the words too young and too small, and I lay on a thin mat and I waited for whatever God had decided about my life. The birth was long and painful in a way I cannot put into words. I screamed until I had no sound left. I bled more than they expected. At one point everything went dark and I thought I had finally found the exit from all of this. But I woke up. The baby was a boy. Small but alive. They called it a blessing. Usman came into the room once. He looked at the baby and nodded and left. He did not ask my name. He did not ask if I was in pain. He just left. I held my son and I felt two things at the same time. Love so big it scared me. And anger so deep I did not know what to do with it. What kind of God was watching all of this and calling it mercy? That question sat in me for years before I was brave enough to ask it out loud. The years moved slowly. I had another child at 16. A girl this time. I named her quietly in my heart before anyone else got to name her. I called her Hope because that was the only thing I was still holding. Usman brought home another wife when I was 17. She was 14. I remember her face when she arrived. That same look I had once worn. Eyes wide and unsure and searching for something solid to hold on to. I did not comfort her the way I wished someone had comforted me. I just handed her a cup of tea and sat next to her in silence. Sometimes silence is the only honest thing you have left. By the time I was 20 I had stopped believing in the God I had been taught about. Not because I stopped believing in God entirely, but because the God I had been raised on seemed to only ever show up for the men. He blessed their decisions. He justified their violence. He was quoted every time someone wanted to silence a woman. I started to wonder if there was a different God. One who had been there the whole time but had been kept from me on purpose. I found out about the phone by accident. Usman had left a small device on the kitchen shelf and gone out for evening prayer. I looked at it for a long time before I touched it. I had not held a phone in years. When I finally picked it up my hands were shaking. I opened the browser with no plan. I just started searching for things. Anything. Everything. My brain was hungry in a way I had not felt since childhood. That night I found a video of a woman speaking. She was dressed simply. Her voice was not loud. She said she had grown up Muslim. She had followed every rule. She had prayed and covered and obeyed. She said despite all of that she had felt hollow and unseen her entire life. And then she said something that stopped me completely. She said Jesus came to her in a dream. And he said her name. I had been taught that Jesus was a lesser prophet. That Christians had lied about him. That his name was not to be respected in our house. But the woman on the screen was not speaking about a lie. She was speaking about something real. I could hear it in her voice. The difference between a person who is reciting and a person who is remembering. She was remembering. I watched that video 3 times. Then I searched for more. I found testimonies from women in countries like mine. Women who had been used and discarded and silenced. Women who had cried out to God and felt nothing. And then women who had encountered something different. Something they all described the same way. A presence. A warmth. A voice that called them by name. I started searching the Bible secretly. At night when the children were sleeping and the house was still. I read slowly because my reading was not strong. But I read. And something about the words felt different from what I had known. Not like commands. Not like rules. More like someone speaking directly to me. Like the words knew I was reading them. One night I was so tired and so empty that I just whispered out loud in the dark. Jesus, if you are real, I want to know. That was it. Nothing dramatic. Just a woman on a floor in the dark asking a question she had been afraid to ask her whole life. I did not hear a voice. But I felt something. A stillness that was not empty. Like a room that had been cold for a long time and someone had quietly lit a fire in the corner. I sat with that feeling for a long time. A few nights later I had a dream. I was in a very dark place. Not a room. Just darkness all around me, and the ground was wet and I could not stand up properly. I kept trying to get up and falling back down. I was not scared in the way you are scared of something outside you. I was scared in the way you are scared when you realize you cannot save yourself. Then there was light. Not sudden. Gradual. Like morning coming slowly. And in that light was a man. He was wearing white and he was walking toward me without any rush. His face was calm. Not the calm of someone who does not care. The calm of someone who is not afraid. He stopped in front of me and he looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I had not seen in a very long time. He was not looking at a function. He was not looking at a wife or a servant or a body. He was looking at me. Zara. The person. He reached out his hand. I looked at it for a moment. Then I took it. The moment I did, the dark disappeared. I was standing in light and I was clean and I was whole in a way I had not been since before I knew what marriage was. I woke up crying so hard I had to press my face into the cloth of the mat to keep from waking anyone. I stayed on that floor for a long time just breathing. Something had changed inside me. I did not have the words for it yet. But I knew. I started reading more carefully. I found a verse that I read over and over. You are precious in my sight and I love you. I had never been told I was precious. Not once in my entire life. I had been told I was a good wife, a clean woman, a quiet daughter. But never precious. Never loved like that. Never seen. I kept my belief hidden for almost a year. I practiced in secret. I prayed in silence. I whispered his name when no one could hear. But the thing about truth is that it grows. You cannot keep it small forever. It pushes toward the light the same way everything that is alive does. It was my sister-in-law who found out. She came to visit one afternoon and I had left my phone open on a page from the Gospel of Luke. She stared at it for a long time without saying anything. Then she looked at me. I did not deny it. I was tired of denying things. That same evening the news spread through the family like fire through dry grass. My brothers came the next morning. 3 of them. They did not knock. They hit me. They dragged me by my arms into the back room and they locked the door from outside. I could hear my children crying from somewhere in the house. That sound was the hardest part. Not the pain in my body. The sound of my children not knowing where I was. I was in that room for 3 days. No light came in. Someone pushed food under the door once. I prayed the entire time. Not because I felt strong. Because it was the only thing I had left to do. I whispered his name in the dark over and over. Jesus. 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 Like a rope I was holding onto with both hands. On the 3rd night a woman I had known briefly at the market managed to get a message to me through a crack in the wall. She had heard what happened. She told me if I could get out she would be waiting at the far end of the road behind the tailor's building. On the 4th morning when my youngest brother came to bring water I pretended to be sicker than I was. When he opened the door wider to look at me I moved past him quickly and I ran. I had no shoes. I had nothing. I just ran. I found the woman at the end of the road exactly where she said she would be. Her name was Dina. She was quiet and she was kind and she was a believer. She did not ask me many questions. She just wrapped her scarf around my shoulders and walked with me to her home. Dina gave me food and a place to sleep. She cleaned the cuts on my face. She sat with me and she did not tell me what to think or what to do. She just opened her Bible and read slowly and let the words land where they needed to land. He heals those who are broken. He wraps up their wounds. I listened and I wept because I had been broken for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen clearly. I stayed with Dina for 2 weeks. During that time she introduced me to a small group of believers who met quietly in a home nearby. They were ordinary people. Some had been through things similar to mine. Some had come to faith through very different roads. But they all had the same thing in their eyes when they looked at me. Not pity. Recognition. The look of people who had also once been in the dark and had also been found. The day I was baptized was the most quiet and the most powerful day of my life. There was no celebration outside. No music anyone else could hear. Just a small room and a few people and water and a prayer. When I came up out of the water, I did not feel like the same person who had gone in. Not because the past was erased, but because it no longer owned me. The girl who had been given away at 9 years old, the woman who had bled and served and been silenced and locked in rooms, she was still part of my story. But she was not the end of it. I thought about my children every single day. That was the deepest wound. Leaving them was not a choice I made easily. It was a choice between dying and surviving. And I chose to survive because I believed that a living mother who found her way back to them was worth more than a dead one who never left the room. I do not know when I will see them again. But I pray for them every day. Every single day. Healing has not been fast. Some nights I still wake up shaking. Some mornings the weight of everything is so heavy I cannot get up right away. But something is different now. When I lie in the dark and the old fear comes back, I am not alone in it anymore. I feel that same presence I felt the first night I whispered his name. That warmth in the corner. That quiet that is full instead of empty. I have been learning to read better. I have been memorizing verses. I have been finding my voice again slowly, the way you find something you buried a long time ago and almost forgot was yours. If you have listened to all of this, I want to say one thing directly to you. Not a woman specifically, not a Muslim specifically, not any particular kind of person. Just you, whoever you are. If you have ever felt like you did not matter. If you have ever been used and discarded. If you have ever cried in the dark and asked God whether he could see you. If you have ever wondered whether love is even real or whether it is just a word people use to get what they want. Then this is for you. There is a God who sees you. Not the version of you that is useful. Not the version of you that obeys. Not the version of you that stays quiet and endures. The real you. The broken, tired, searching, hopeful you. He sees that person and he loves that person and he is not waiting for you to earn it. I know because I was a 9-year-old girl given away to a man who never once said my name with kindness. I was a teenager bleeding on a mat. I was a woman locked in a room for believing something that gave me the first real peace I had ever known. And through all of it, he found me. He did not wait for me to find him. He came. He reached down. He called me by name. My name is Zara. I am 28 years old. And I am finally free. And freedom, I am learning, is not just the absence of chains. It is the presence of truth. It is waking up and knowing that your life belongs to you again. It is hearing your own thoughts without fear. It is being able to say your own name and recognize the person behind it. For so many years, I lived as if I was invisible even to myself. Now I am learning to see. Slowly. Gently. One piece at a time. There are still questions I carry. There are still scars that have not fully healed. Some days I wonder why my story had to be written the way it was. Why a child had to endure what I endured just to find the light later. I do not have all the answers. But I have something stronger than answers. I have peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that stays even when memories try to pull you back. Sometimes I sit quietly and think about that little girl I used to be. The one who sat with painted hands and fear in her chest, not understanding what was being taken from her. I wish I could go back and hold her. I wish I could tell her that this is not the end of her story. That one day she will run. That one day she will find her voice. That one day she will know what it means to be loved without conditions. I cannot go back. But I can live in a way that honors her. I can become the voice she never had. If you are listening to me right now, I want you to pause for a moment. Not because I have something dramatic to say, but because sometimes the quiet moments are where truth lands the deepest. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever felt unseen? Have you ever felt like your life was being lived for someone else's expectations? Have you ever silenced your own questions because you were afraid of what the answers might cost you? If any part of my story has touched something inside you, do not ignore it. That feeling is not an accident. It is an invitation. You do not have to understand everything at once. You do not have to have perfect words. You can start the same way I did. Quietly. Honestly. Just one sentence. Just one question.